Hi, my friend. It's Pat Sloan here. Happy Saturday. This is the first day I don't have to make something for the video. Yes. I think I'm having just way too much fun this fall. Lots of making, which is good, but it gets a little like, it's nice to have a day where I don't have to make anything. So on the calendar was Scrap-a-Licious, and I'm going to talk about UFO challenges, answer a few Q&As, talk about quilts we may have been left by our ancestors. All right. First, Scrap-a-Licious. I thought I'm going to get out the aqua squares. Oh my goodness. I would love to have this done like this, you know, like one of those TikTok things where you like jump and then it's finished. Yeah. But I would like to do this for my bed, but I think it would be gorgeous to hang on the wall in here too. It's so soothing. Those aqua colors are just so soothing. I just love it. Now, size-wise, to do a queen-size bed, I do want it to go a pretty far drop when I do this. Right now, the width of this is pretty much the top of the queen-size bed. Maybe just overhangs, maybe a block on each side, like a 2-inch on each side. So that means I need to do, you know, a good 20 inches on each side for a drop. So another 40 inches wide, and then probably another 20 inches long. I don't pull it up over the pillows. I use, you know, pillow shams and just let the pillows out on the top, so the top just goes right flat on the bed. So the top of a queen size bed is about 60 by 60. So there you go. It is looking so yummy. I just love it so much. Okay. So then before we go further, Make-A-Wish. I believe today might be the last day for Make-A-Wish, and my quilt is doing really well. So I'm hoping somebody who wins it really loves it when they get it. I loved making it, and Gina Tell did a beautiful job quilting it. So it's exciting to raise the funds for Make-A-Wish, because remember, there's 4 quilts being auctioned. All right, let's talk about Ancestor Day. That's what today is. It's celebrating your ancestors. I thought, well, let's narrow that down. Let's bring that tight. Let's tighten that up. Let's celebrate a quilt that you were left by somebody in your family. Now, my family doesn't have any quilters in it, so nobody quilted, but Greg's family did. Both his grandmothers quilted. And then my mother-in-law was a quilter also after a while. Same time I became a quilter, she did too. But she always wanted to learn to quilt because her mother did. So when we both were first learning to quilt and, you know, doing things together, Madge, my mother-in-law, gave me one of the family quilts, one of her mother's quilts, and her mom is Mom. That's what everybody called her. Now, I want to show you my mom's quilt because this is a true utility quilt. And I want to show you a few things about it. If you've ever seen my my lecture that I did when I was traveling on the road, this was part of my lecture. But I'm going to hold it up. It is made with scraps. It is made with clothing. My mother-in-law could tell me which pieces were her sister's, you know, skirts, her own pajamas, her mom's house dresses, you know, because her mom was of that era that they wore a house dress. So here is the quilt, and it is very large churn dash blocks, which might be one of the reasons I love a churn dash so much. So I'm just going to hold it up and talk to you a little bit about it, as long as I can get I've got the cord. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to hold this up. So each churn dash is kind of color coordinated, like pink, pink, blue, blue, you know, orange, orange. You can see that. The quilt is tied, and it has a very thin blanket in it. It is machine pieced. So this is all machine pieced, and this was just used as a family quilt, you know, like, you know, for the kids on the couch and all that. So one of the things I learned was just how interesting a churn dash is. This is kind of a big chunky one, but I also learned that binding will wear out first on your quilt, and it will wear out in the most annoying spot. which is right along the top ridge. And I'm going to show you that here because Madge had to do a repair. This is the repair job, and my mother-in-law wasn't too particular with things. She, I'll show you what she did then. But Greg's grandma, when she did this is the backing. It's like a very soft ticking. And what she did is she pulled the backing to the front to make the binding, which means the grain line was running right along the edge of the binding, the grain of the fabric, because it was not cut on bias. On bias, you would have the grain going angled in short little pieces, but instead, one long piece of grain line. So when a thread broke, the entire binding opened like this. So the thread along the top here broke, wore out from 3 little boys, and then the binding went like this. So when she gave it to me, the binding was literally in a lot of spots open. It was, you know, and so here is her solution. So Madge just did a running stitch. So you can see at the top of this here. Do you see that? The binding, you know, was destroyed along that edge when the thread broke and it just pulled out and the binding came open. So Madge just took a running stitch the whole way along by hand, because I guess that's what she felt like doing that day. She didn't put it on her machine and do it because she's a beautiful seamstress. Yeah, she made clothing and all kinds of stuff, but instead she did this by hand that day, and there's nothing else by hand on here. There's an interesting repair job on the back because the back split, that fabric split. Do you see it, that white thing? So that's a piece of fabric that was sort of tucked underneath and then hand stitched down. So there's repairs on the back. There were not many ties because for Mom's quilt there was no batting, so it didn't matter. The ties didn't have to be very close. They're a little further apart because there's just a fairly thin blanket in here. So what I'd love you to do today is, if you have a quilt that is from one of your family members, from in your family, show that quilt today. So it's Ancestor Day. We like to see your heirloom quilts. Okay, this will get put back in the closet with the few of my mother-in-law's quilts that we have. I miss Madge a lot. We were great quilt buddies, great friends. Okay, let's do a UFO. So I'm going to show you 2 things. I got 2 back. One is my Oh My Stars. So my local friend Karen quilted this for me. Where's the top? Okay, here we go. Here's the top. So I've got the Oh My Stars done, and she did a really nice open sort of swirly thing with leaves on it. You can see it in some of the light. See, isn't that cute? And I think I'm going to bind it, I don't know, I might bind it in orange because I have orange, or I'll bind it in yellow, the same kind of to go with the border. Here's the backing. I used that blue from my Harmony, my wide back. Okay, and I have another UFO that's quilted. I still didn't do the sleeve for the Boo Crew, so that's sitting here. The Boo Crew sleeve, I had to have to hand stitch down the back, the sleeve in the back. Okay, so this is the unicorn panel. So excited because I need to send this off to the little girl who it goes to, and Judy quilted this one for me. Once again, some swirls. This has got really cute swirls. So this used squares, 2.5-inch squares all around the panel. Isn't that sweet? And then I have, I don't know, I used the pink Harmony wide back, which is probably what I'll do for the binding, because I went ahead and put like this little tiny border around it, and then I'll just bind it in the same thing. So cute. I love it. And then her little sister was born. So this goes to Magnolia, and her little sister Penelope was born. So I need to have a smaller quilt for the baby, and then later I can send her a bigger quilt. You know how that goes, right? Yeah. All right, I have something fun to show you. Oh wait, let me do Let me do Midnight Moon. So Midnight Moon, it's not a UFO because I have not stopped working on it, but I got the little outer border. So what I did was a very small, I cut 1.5 inches outer border, and this is out of like a grunge fabric, and more than likely I will trim that down a little bit after it's quilted. I'll see once it's quilted, and then trim it down. I do have to now cut the backing for that. So I've got the backing, the candy corn that my friend Lisa sent me, who was running this sew along. So that is this weekend. I want to, and then decide the quilting on it. So I have to get that backing. Those big backings are sometimes, you know, they're not my favorite thing to cut. You know, if I have to say, like, what don't you like about the quilting process? Like getting the backings organized. You know, once it's organized, I'm fine. But getting it started and being sure it's big enough, because I sent one recently where it wasn't big enough. Luckily, it was to my local friend, Karen, who, and so she came over and got another piece and just sewed it on the bottom for me. But I'm like, really? I mean, I do so many, but occasionally maybe a number gets, you know, I get the number wrong. I think I did the same number, like the width and the length the same, something like that, because it was short. Anyway, it happens. It happens to everybody. Okay, so I wanted to show you a picture, because I talked to you a lot about living in the city. I tell you, I'm a city girl. I live in the city, and I mean, I always have. I've lived very urban. Urban being right outside big cities, right in very large metropolitan areas. And I just find it easier to say I live in the city. Well, I feel like I really do live in a city, because our community here is called well, it's called Herndon. That's the town I live in. But we have a downtown, and Greg took the drone up at night, and I'm going to pop this picture up. And so here you can see our downtown. That is where all the large office buildings are, and they're basically a small skyscrapers. They're huge buildings, and there's a whole bunch of them, and they're building more of them. There's a lot of businesses, a lot of industry here. But what I want you to notice is all of the trees. The tree canopy here is quite heavy. We have a lot of trees. But underneath that tree are thousands and thousands and thousands of homes. So if you were at a different angle, like if you were in a plane, you would have seen it a little bit higher up and seen the lights and the streets and things like that. Instead, he was kind of like at an angle a little bit. So anyways, I thought I'd show you that picture so that you get it. That's just up the street from me. That's just, you know, less than 10 minutes from my home. So I just thought that would be kind of cool to show you that. All right, let's do a little Q&A. Oh, first, let me show you the mail call. I got a mail call, and this is from Karen Griska, who is the designer of the Red Zinger. And do you remember I asked, well, let me just show you this back. Look what she put on the back of the envelope. Surprise! Do you know what that, do you recognize that? Do you remember me asking about that the other day? Karen did. Karen watched, and what she sent me was the salvage for the radish, like she has in her quilt. I want a radish in my quilt too. Oh my goodness, she was able to find some of the fabric. So here is, and this is not new fabric. I can tell you, this fabric has been around a long time, long time. I probably had parts of this. So look here. So she had a piece, and so she had to sort of make my salvage for me, and she tells me that. So she sort of sewed it together for me because she couldn't find any with the edges, but so she just sewed it on from one of the other pieces. So sweet, Karen. Mwah, thank you so much. This made my day, made my week, made my month. I just wanted a radish in my quilt. So now I have one. That's going to go on immediately. The very next block that I do, that I can get the most of it, probably on the long side, it's going in. Okay. So I have a little Q&A. So Murphy asked, was Jay Murphy. Okay. How do I wash my quilts? They are a new quilter, and they're finding lots of conflicting advice. Yes, washing your quilt. There are people who will go in great detail using particular soaps and things like that. And then there's a lot of us who just wash them in our gentle cycle with a little bit of a gentle laundry soap, and that works just fine. It's like, you know, you're going to throw a cotton shirt in. You know, at least that is to me. But there are, like years ago, there was somebody who really got on the bandwagon for this soap that they use for horses, I think, Orvis soap. And so a lot of people like to use that. It's basically a gentle soap. That's what you're looking for, something gentle. We don't have a lot of scents in it, you know, like smells. You don't want a harder chemical. You don't want the bleach. You don't want bleach in your soap or anything for your fabrics. So just gentle, and then tumble dry, if you have a setting that is a light, and then if you can maybe, you know, just check on it so that, you know, maybe you catch it just before it's finished and let it finish air dry. Now remember, when you do wash your quilt, it'll get nice and crinkly, which a lot of us like. Like I'm going to be washing this one as soon as I put the little edge on it, because it's going to go to a child, and I want to be sure it's, you know, fine, that nothing runs. I will put color catchers in so that if there's any loose dyes, they adhere to that instead of adhering to other pieces of the fabric. Okay, a second question was from Lori, and she says, Pat, do you listen to music when you're sewing at night? That's a really good question. I do. I like to listen to music that has no words, and there's lots of channels out there. They're kind of background music. I like something that's a little peppier, something maybe that has a little jazz, a little R&B vibe to it. They're often cafe channels, like coffee shop type, you know, mixes. I just don't want words when I'm doing something, because I tend to they just distract me, and I don't really want to hear them. I just want the melody. I just want the instruments to play. Often though, I also will watch something on my tablet. So if I'm at the sewing machine, and I will watch something on my tablet. But that's when I'm doing something I don't have to think about too much. If I really have to be concentrating on something I'm doing, no sound. No music, no TV, no Kindle, no nothing. Because it's too distracting. So I will use just silence, and because my head's loud and busy enough. All right, the other one I have is a little bit longer, so I'll just give you a few pointers, and then I'm going to point you to my book, because I have lots more answers in there. So Karen said that she's tried free motion quilting, but she always tenses up and then she gives up. And I think that's common. Free motion quilting is a technique that you do have to practice. And then you have to practice again and again and again and again. You have to keep practicing. It isn't something you do once and then you get it magically. It just isn't. There's a rare person that sits down and has the eye-hand coordination, and it just sort of flows from their fingertips, but they are a unicorn. The quilting unicorn. Most of us take a while. It took me months. It probably took me over a year before I felt like I was machine quilting, free motion quilting decently, and I was doing quite a bit of it. So I have a book, because there's lots of tips and lots of things to think about when you're doing this. But let me give you one of my biggest tips that I think helps everybody really progress quickly in your skills, because it's practice. But one of the things is, you don't want to practice because you don't want to mess up your top. Right? You don't want to mess it up. So you're like afraid and you don't want to do it. Or a lot of times your tops are bulky. They're big. And so they're harder to practice on. And people practice on like one square, but that's not very realistic. You fill it up fast. It's not inspiring. You have nothing to look at usually, and maybe it's solid or just the same print, and it's not very inspiring to work on. So my suggestion is that you buy 5 panels. Okay, so that's my magic number. You can buy more, but don't buy less. Don't have less, have 5. So what's a panel? That's like the middle here of the unicorn. And by the way, this unicorn panel is all sold out, because you all bought it every place I could find it. So it's super cute. Okay, so you buy a panel. Then you could put, like, if it's too small for anything useful, like for a child's quilt, you could just put a border on it. Okay, then Do 5 of those. Then what you're going to do is you now have something to quilt around. You have an image to look at. You have things that you can go around so that you have a way to like think about your design, and then quilt them in a row very quickly. And very quickly, well, I mean by every single day. You must sit down and free motion quilt some of your panel. Maybe you have a big chunk of time, so you could sit there for maybe, you know, an hour and do it, but get up and stretch. Don't get yourself all crazy. But go one right after the other without a break. And then at the end of those 5 panels, take a look at your workmanship. You're going to see a great improvement from your skill set of eye-hand coordination to move that fabric, because it's something you really do have to practice. And if you're finding that your ergonomics are really bad, you should be sitting, let me stand here, you should be sitting so that your arms are flat on the surface of the bed of the machine. So you can't be too low, we're up like this, and you don't want to, you're probably not going to be too high, but most of the time you're too low. So you're like this because your arms are up here. Your arms need to be at a right angle, and that's the perfect placement of your hands, and that will keep your shoulders from, getting sore. Okay, so there you go. I went a little longer than I thought, but okay, if you have a quilt that was made by somebody in your family, we would love to see it today. This was Greg's grandma's quilt. And it's not a beauty by any means, but we're so happy to have it. And my Scrap-a-Licious. So if you have a scrap quilt you're working on, share that as well. And I hope my tips for free motion quilting help some of you, and you can pick up my book. So I love you. Mwah. Thank you for being here in the Sloan Zone. I will see you online.